Happy Monday, everyone. Happy Monday and happy November. Happy November. Gosh, I can't believe there are only 2 months left in this year, but here we are. It is November. It is the day before Election Day 2020. We just had Halloween. How many people still have candy left over from Halloween? I know we do. We made a little socially distanced treat table for the trick-or-treaters and put out some bags of candy. We still have candy left. So that's going to be a little bit of solace over this cycle. Hey, babe, thank you for being here. As you're hopping on, please say hi. I am Abra Kurt, and you are watching Sparked, which is my weekly lifestyle series and its own vibrant online community that connects right here in the comments of the show every single week. Hi, Rose. Hi, Mama Vicky. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Every week on Spark, we connect around all things like personal growth, wellness, and the world around us, which is very relevant to tonight's topic. We light the fire of connection, reflection, and inspiration, and I always share some tips to help us take some action and make change in our own lives. And the last week of every month is always dedicated to a book discussion. I started a Let's Get Lit, as in literature, get it, virtual book club a few months ago, and I dedicate one week every month to discuss a great book. Now, on purpose, moved last week's discussion to tonight because I felt like this is a really important moment for us as people, for our country, and the book I had selected for the month of October to cap off this month's whole theme of our best selves was Dan Rather's What Unites Us. And so I felt like it would be really fitting to talk through this book tonight on the eve of Election Day 2020 to cap off our whole month-long theme of our best selves. Hey, Trish, thank you so much for being here. Georgie, hello. George, thank you for being here. It's great to see you guys. As you're hopping on, please say hello. And before we get started tonight, I want to thank a bunch of people who have supported our content and community since our episode 2 weeks ago. I missed you guys so much last week, but I wanted to postpone the conversation about October's book for tonight on this very, very special Election Day Eve. So first, I'd like to thank Nico, Dawn, my sweet, sweet mother-in-law, Vicky, my dear Georgie, Karen and Tom, and Rose and Donna for your generous support of our last episode in between then and now. So I posted that tonight's discussion was going to be about what unites us on sort of two different levels. So on one level, we're going to talk about Dan Rather's book for a little while because I know some of you were reading along this month and I want to hear what you thought and what your favorite parts were, what parts really resonated with you most. But I also then want to open up the second half of our conversation for a broader discussion about the values that unite us. Because you guys, this is a really important moment for us, for our country, and I want to just break down all the labels, all the things, the constructs that other people are putting up to divide us, and have a real conversation about what truly unites us as people, as Americans, and how we can come together and heal during this time that has been running pretty high with anxiety and antipathy. So if that all sounds like a heck yeah to you, please send up some hearts. Please hit that share button because I think probably a lot of us could use some words about what unites us today, right? So hit those hearts, hit that share button, spread some positivity across your social media feeds because Lord knows we need that positivity now more than ever, right? Nico, hello. It is so great to see you. Danielle, Donna, hello. I have some peeps here from my book club in real life and I can't wait to hear what you guys thought of Dan Rather's What Unites Us. So I want to start out by putting a few guardrails on the conversation though, and I don't want this to inhibit anybody's engagement, but I do want to say we're talking about non-partisan values tonight, you guys. We're talking about things that unite us. Dan's book is intentionally split down the center between red and blue because, you guys, we're talking about our values as humans. Okay, this isn't about party. This isn't about a person or people or candidates or politics. Tonight's conversation is about values, about our common humanity and our human values. And so that is what I want us all to connect around and engage in the comments tonight. And I also want to share that I struggled, you guys. I struggled over the past, and I had 2 weeks. I had 2 weeks to prepare for tonight's show. The topics, this is my 20th live episode. This is my 20th live episode since I launched on this platform back in May. And I've never struggled so much with a theme and content as I did in preparing for this show. Because I'm feeling the weight of this moment. I'm feeling the importance of this moment. I wanted to do right by you all. I wanted to have a fair and balanced conversation. I wanted to do all the things. And I struggled with being inspired in some ways as well. And so I hope that tonight's conversation is meaningful for everyone. I think it's going to be important. I think it's going to be hopeful. I think it's going to be inclusive. But ultimately, it was a struggle for me. And you guys, those who know me well know that when I'm seeking inspiration, I look to authors and other people's writings. And you guys, I read the Declaration of Independence to prepare for tonight's conversation. I read the Constitution, not all the amendments, but the first articles. I read the Constitution. I read some of the Federalist Papers, you guys. I went all the way back to the Federalist Papers. I read Sojourner Truth. I read Frederick Douglass. I have this really cool book, actually, that put all these things in one helpful place. It's the U.S. Constitution and Other Writings, and then I have a separate volume of the Federalist Papers. But you guys, I read presidential speeches, inaugural addresses, farewell addresses, all right? I read the act that created Yellowstone National Park that was signed into law by President Grant in 1872 to establish the first national park in this country because I wanted to find things that unite us. I wanted to find inspiring words that unite us. And I read all those things, and you guys, I still struggled with framing this conversation tonight. I still struggled with framing this conversation because I want to discuss Dan Rather's book, but I also wanted to make it a broader conversation for people who, Dan Rather may not resonate with some people, right? And I'm going to talk about that later. Christine, it's so great to see you. Thank you for being here. So, it was Friday night. I had actually emailed my book club girls, and there was a Dan Rather conversation that was happening on Politics and Prose that was being streamed through a bookstore website in DC. And I was looking forward to tuning into that and, using part of that discussion to inform tonight's conversation. But I was struggling, you guys. And so I just want to say that again and admit that. And I actually didn't tune into the discussion. I was reading the Constitution. I was reading the Federalist Papers. I was reading farewell addresses and inaugural addresses and all the things. And I still didn't have this show framed. And so I was getting frustrated, and I decided to call it a night, and I would go back to it on Saturday. And I did what, I would normally do on a Friday night at home. Scott actually had a show that night. And so I drank some wine, I ate some cheese, and I watched the season premiere of This Is Us that I had DVR'd. And where are my This Is Us peeps? And I'm not going to give away any spoilers if you watch the show and you haven't watched this week's, the premiere episode for this season yet. But you guys, that show always gets me right here. I usually end up tearing up in some way, and the Pearson family did not disappoint. And they gave me what I wasn't getting in the Federalist Papers and in the, Yellowstone National Park Act and in all the things. They gave me catharsis and clarity and storytelling, and it lifted me out of this need to frame this conversation in a political election cycle kind of way. And it brought me back to the basics. And it brought me back to the idea of values. And it brought me back to not needing to be pedantic about this, but that values are what I do. And it's what I talk about with every single client I have. We have discussions about core values. We talk about core values in this show a lot. And so I came to the realization through a show that is brilliant and emotional in its storytelling that, again, it's about connecting as people. And it's about common values and storytelling and sharing what unites us. And I don't have to have all of the trappings of every political speech and document and, that formed our country that was ever written. And so that was my starting place and my reset button. And so, yes, I'm seeing my This Is Us people and my Wine and Cheese people. Yeah, it was a great episode. It was a great episode. I was surprised that it was 2 hours long, and I was afraid I wasn't going to get it all in. But you guys, I did. And so, it's the eve of Election Day. Our country may appear to be more divided than ever. And in many ways, it is. And in many ways, we are allowing it to happen to ourselves. You guys, we're allowing it to happen to ourselves. And there's another book I read in October called The End of October. And it's a fiction novel that was published in the spring at the beginning of the pandemic. And it's about a pandemic. And it's told from the perspective of a guy who works in public health. And it's about his family and his travels across the world during this pandemic and how it came to be and what happens to, people in this country and people in other countries as a result. It's a global pandemic. Through the lens of this fiction novel that literally seemed like the author had a crystal ball. And I finished it on the day before Halloween. I bought it back in the spring and wanted to save it for October on purpose to read at the end of October. And you guys, the last sentence of the book that summed up everything about this pandemic and all the division and all the things that happen in this book that are literally playing out right now in our country. The last sentence of the book was, when they talk about the future and when they look back to see why this happened, we did it to ourselves. We did it to ourselves was the last line of that book. And again, it's something that unites us, right? It's something that unites us, that if we are inflamed by things that we see on social media, if we are inflamed by the press, if we are inflamed by the words of one man, we make that choice. We make that choice to respond the way we do, to let it affect us the way it does. And I'm not saying that we ignore the horrible things that are happening, but I want to remind us all that we can control our responses to them. We can tap in to our best selves, to our core values, to our humanity, and use that as our guide. And so we're using that as our guide tonight. Christine says, wish the world could just be more open-minded. Yeah, I'm sorry. Chelsea, hi. I think this might be your first time here. It's the first time I've seen you in the comments. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Yeah, I wish the world could be more open-minded too. And I'm hoping that we can help bring that value to people tonight in this conversation. So thank you so much for saying that. So you guys, divisions are created, labels are created. We're going to break through all that stuff tonight. We're going to talk about what unites us, because other people's actions don't get to define who we are. Other people's words don't get to define who we are. The way other people treat us, the way other people react to us doesn't get to define who we are, okay? Our actions, our words, our values, our responses, that is what defines us. So there it is, you guys. Looking inward for change and betterment, living our values. This is stuff I talk about all the time. And I was able to tap into that to frame this show. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with y'all tonight. And I know we have some new people on tonight. We have some people who are longtime viewers. For those of you who have been here before, I like to start every discussion with a quote of the week. And tonight is no different. I'm seeing the hearts come up for the quote of the week, because you guys love the quote of the week as much as I do. And because we are devoting part of our conversation to a book Our quote of the week comes from Dan Rather's What Unites Us. And so I want to share this really important thought that I feel like sums up October's theme of our best selves, that cuts to the heart of what unites us, and is ultimately really, really hopeful. And so the quote of the week that I selected for tonight's conversation is this: we are a nation not only of dreamers, but also of fixers. We have looked at our land and people and said time and again, this is not good enough. We can be better. We are a nation of dreamers and fixers. We have looked around time and again and said, this isn't good enough. We can be better. And you guys, I think a lot of us feel that way right now. I think that is a feeling that unites us. I think this is a theme that unites us. And so I want to ask you guys right now to take to the comments, because those of you who have tuned in before know that this is an interactive show. I love to read what you guys have to say. I want to have a conversation. So right now, before we dive into the book, I want you guys to think about the quote of the week, ways that we have looked around our own country and said, this isn't good enough, we can be better. And I want you to share with me a way that you think our country has actually looked around in your lifetime, and I know we run the age gamut here, we run a wide age gamut. I want you to share a way that you think our country has looked around and said, this isn't good enough, we can be better, and was not only a dreamer, but a fixer. Something that we dreamed and fixed in your lifetime. In the comments, if you can think of something, please share it. I'd love to hear some ways that you think our country has gotten better, has improved, has fixed something, has righted a wrong in your lifetime. If there's something that you can point to, or just a way that we've looked around and said, this isn't good enough, we can be better, we can do better, we can be more, we can be explorers, we can be thinkers, we can be learners, something that has gotten better in your lifetime. Please share in the comments if there's something that you think. I have a list. I have a list of things that I'll share while you guys are taking to the comments, because there's always a little bit of a delay. So while you guys are sharing your thoughts, I'm going to share mine in my lifetime. Scott says how we all came together after the 9/11 attacks. Yes, you guys, that was a moment of national unity that I wish we could tap into again without the tragedy that had to precede it, right? In that moment, we were all in this together and we knew it. And why we can't look at ourselves that way again, I'm not sure. But I hope we can tap back into that feeling without having to experience that kind of national tragedy. And frankly, we are experiencing on some level that kind of national tragedy again. We have 230,000 fatalities to a global pandemic. Okay, we are experiencing more deaths of our citizens than we did in 9/11, and I wish that could unite us on some level. And, you know, hopefully we can have a conversation tonight that brings a little more healing and hope to the world. Rose says electing Obama. Yes, that was on my list too, Rose. Our first African-American president, our first Black president in 2008 in my lifetime. I also, I put the Obergefell versus Hodges decision on my list, you guys, when the Supreme Court decided that love is love and people who want to get married and commit their lives together should be allowed to do that regardless of gender, right? So when same-sex marriage became the law of the land, I think that is one way that our country looked around and said, you know what, we can do better by our people. Love is love. And so that is something that made my list. George says the lunar landing in 1969. Yeah, that was just before my time, but that's a great one, George. We were explorers, we were discoverers, right? We were breaking new ground. We were united around, you know, like the moonshot, right? Kennedy's moonshot. Donna says, I know we're trying to stay away from the political, but the excitement around the 2009 Obama inauguration was amazing. Yeah, I was at an inaugural ball that night. And, you know, it's not about the politics or, the person necessarily, right? We can talk about that enthusiasm, that hopefulness that our country tapped into in that moment without being partisan, right? So Donna, thank you for saying that. Georgie says, how we come together to feed our children and families who don't have enough to eat. Yes. The outpouring of charity that has happened in the wake of the pandemic, the way we've stepped up to supply our food banks, to help our neighbors, to help others, right? That is beautiful, Georgie. Thank you for saying that. So, you guys, let's send up some hearts for the way we are able to come together in moments when it counts, right? Let's send up some hearts for being able to come together when it counts and hope that we can tap into that common humanity again, you guys. I also wanted to share something that, it's kind of on par with George's moon landing statement. But an innovation that I have come to really appreciate is the tech revolution from Silicon Valley that allows us all to be here together tonight. Okay, there are people from all over this country tuning in tonight, sharing in this conversation and engaging with each other together when we couldn't normally all be in the same room together. And, there's a tech revolution responsible for that. Our social media can be problematic in many, many ways, but it can also unite us. And I just want to say a little thank you to the great minds that made that possible tonight. I am so appreciative of that. Vicky says, bringing more diverse ethnic individuals to leadership roles. Yes, seeing more of our citizens represented in roles of leadership. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Let's hope that trend continues. All right, you guys. So I want to devote part of the conversation to talking about Dan Rather's What Unites Us. I know a lot of people on the discussion were reading along this month. So I want you to start taking to the comments to share. I shared a quote that really resonated with me. If there was a quote that really resonated with you, if you have a favorite quote from What Unites Us, please share in the comments. Please share in the comments if you have a favorite quote from What Unites Us, because I know there were a lot of great lines in this book. I know some of you have been reading along and have shared some thoughts with me. So if there's a great quote from the book that you loved, if there was a quote from those of you who tuned in maybe to the live discussion from Politics and Prose, please share in the comments. I'd love to see what really resonated with you in this book. Donna says, the way Americans come together after disasters, Katrina, the Haiti earthquake, hurricanes, floods, fire. Yeah, the way we can unite around tragedies, you guys, we're good at that, right? We're really good at uniting and helping each other in moments of tragedy. So if we could just remember that feeling when things aren't quite so tragic, or when they're tragic in different ways, right? Remembering that we're all together no matter what the circumstances are, in good times and in bad, right? There are things that unite us all the time. So Donna, yeah, thank you for sharing that. If you guys have a favorite quote from the book, please share it. And I want to talk a little bit about the book before we open up to a broader conversation. So you guys, in What Unites Us, Dan Rather organizes 15 essays into 5 categories that, the way he sees it, form kind of the foundation of our shared American values. And those sort of 5 overarching themes are freedom, community, exploration, responsibility, and character. And so many of the things that we've already shared about ways that we so appreciate about how people can come together fall into these categories, right? Fall into Dan's categories. Exploration, the moon landing, the innovations out of Silicon Valley and the tech revolution, right? Responsibility is to helping our neighbors, to helping our fellow citizens when things are hard, when there are natural disasters, when they don't have enough to eat, when they don't have enough of their own resources, right? Things that we can see as our responsibility as good citizens and good neighbors. Community also taps into that feeling, right? Georgie says patriotism is rooted in humility. Nationalism is rooted in arrogance. Yes, that is a great quote from this book, a great quote in this book. Patriotism is rooted in humility. You guys, let's talk about that for a second. So when we think about patriotism, right, like people think, oh, it's about, the symbolism, of patriotism. People take patriotism to mean, well, I'm wearing a flag pin on my jacket, I wave the flag, I stand for the national anthem. There's all these ways in my symbolism that I show my patriotism. But patriotism is rooted in our humility and our actions every day. It's not about the symbolism of patriotism. And the opposite of that is the arrogance of nationalism. And I thought that was a great distinction that Dan makes in this book. And Vicky also agrees. Okay, so you guys, those 5 sections: freedom, community, exploration, responsibility, and character. And then in each of those, Dan breaks out into 3 different themes, a total of 15 essays on different topics that are values that unite us, And some of those are the vote, right? Which is tomorrow is the official election day 2020. We've been voting for, weeks and weeks now already, right? Record numbers of early voting. I think I read today that 2/3 of all of the total votes cast in 2016, we've already hit that total of 2/3 of all the votes cast total in 2016. We've already cast in early voting in 2020. I have my vote necklace on, you guys. That's it's a fundraiser for the nonprofit, non-partisan organization When We All Vote. Trish says, the many things the Pope is changing, religious staunch ways to accept and act more like Christ. Yeah, the way our religious institutions are expanding their views to be more inclusive, to be more accepting, to embrace tolerance on new levels, right? I love that, Trish. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So one of the essays in Freedom is about the vote, dissent, the press, community. Dan talks about inclusion, empathy, immigration. In exploration, he talks about science, books, one of my favorites, the arts. In responsibility, it's about the environment, public education, and service. And in character, audacity, steady, and courage. And I agree with Dan that those are all really, really important American values, concepts that can unite us in many different ways. I'd like to hear from you. What section, for those of you who read along, what section of the book really resonated with you most? Which of those sections really resonated with you? If there are still quotes that you want to share or a particular section of the book that you want to point to. But if there was one of those sections that really resonated with you, that touched your heart the most, that was really like this heck yeah moment for you, what was it? Please share in the comments. Donna says, shout out for voter turnout. She is wearing her vote necklace too. Yes, absolutely. I love that, right? That there's so much enthusiasm in this election. There's so much enthusiasm because there is a lot, that has been going really awry in 2020 in our world and in our country. And I think one of the things that is uniting us this year is our enthusiasm for change. And I am really heartened by that. I'm excited by that. Donna says, bravo for our Jesuit Pope. Yes. proud God of a Jesuit, yeah. Hello, Georgetown. I taught at Georgetown for a hot minute. So yeah. All right, you guys. So if there's a section of the book that really resonated with you, please share in the comments. Whether it was, George talked about the moon landing. So science, exploration, the arts, books, courage, audacity, the vote, right? We all have a lot of enthusiasm for our voting right now. So that is one that is clearly resonating with a lot of Americans this cycle. Record numbers of voter turnout, yes. So share in the comments what section really resonated with you most and why. What did you take away that you found most resonant? And while you're doing that, I want to remind everyone that also in tonight's episode, description, you'll see links to support our content and community. And every week, people, pay it forward who get something out of our discussions. They make contributions to support our content and community. I thanked a whole list of people at the beginning of this conversation. And we always pay that forward again here with a 10% contribution to charity. I'm going to talk about this week's charity a little bit later in the show, but I did want to remind everyone that those links to support our content and community are there. So please consider making a contribution to support this ongoing show and to help us pay it forward to a very important charity doing work in our local communities and around our country. All right. Yes, I love those hearts. You guys love those hearts for paying it forward, right? That's something that unites us. We are charitable people, right? As Georgie mentioned in her comment, the way we come together for neighbors whose needs aren't being met, the way we pull together around times of tragedy and turmoil and natural disasters, right? We are charitable people, you guys, and I'm so, so grateful for that. So thank you. And thank you for all the hearts. Yes, 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 yes. All right, Jane says she is driving home and pulled over to comment. She loves the vote section. And Jane, thank you for being safe and pulling over. Okay, get home safely, first of all. Jane is one of my book club peeps in my community, in my real life world outside the virtual space. She's saying she loves the quote, "To suppress the vote is to make a mockery of democracy, and those who are doing so are essentially acknowledging that their policies are unpopular. If you can't convince a majority of voters your ideas are worthy, you try to limit the pool of voters." Yes, 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 which we can see happening right now to a frightening degree. Danielle says, still reading, but the public education piece has always been important to her. She appreciates the thought-provoking way he talks about the positives and ways our systems haven't measured up. Yes. One of the things I love about this book is that it's about our shared values. It's hopeful, it's inclusive, but it also talks about ways we can still do better, right? And it's why I picked the quote of the week that I chose for this week. It's about looking around and saying, this isn't good enough. We can be better. And I love that because I think there's always growing to do. I think there's always growing to do as individuals, as collective citizens, right? There's always improvement to make. There's always growing to do. So Danielle, thank you for sharing that. For me, the section that resonated most was the section on empathy. And for those of you who don't have the book, I want to share this piece. But for those of you who did read it, it's the essay on empathy, and it's the Warren Buffett hypothetical, right, that he puts out when they're talking about Warren Buffett. So I just want to read this section to you. So Dan's writing about empathy, and he says that we often find the greatest lack of empathy in those who were born lucky. They tend to misidentify that luck as superiority in their character. There are notable exceptions, and he talks about the successful investor Warren Buffett, who once speculated to a group of students about what would happen if, before birth, a genie gave us the opportunity to choose the political, economic, and social system into which we would be born. If a genie gave us this magic, wand, and we could choose all of those things, political, economic, social system into which we were born. What's the catch? He said, one catch, that just before you emerge from the womb, you have to go through a huge bucket with 7 billion slips, one for each human. Okay? One for each human. Dip your hand in, and that's what you get. You could be born intelligent or not intelligent, born healthy or disabled, born black or white, born in the US or in Bangladesh. You have no idea what slip you will get. So not knowing what slip you are going to get, how would you design the world? Not knowing what slip you would get, how would you design the world? And Warren Buffett goes on, he calls it the ovarian lottery, right? The luck of where many of us were born, right? Those of us who were born in this country. I know some of us who are watching were not born in this country, who, and most of us, right, our ancestors from generations back were not born in this country, all right? Most of us can trace our families back to somewhere other than here. And so in that way, I think the immigration chapter can resonate with most of us, right? That, unless our ancestors were, Native American or were brought here as slaves against their will, our ancestors came here by choice from somewhere else to build a better, new life in the United States of America or in the New World before it was the United States of America, right? Depending on when they got here. So we would probably do all well to remember that is something that unites us as well, right? That unites us as well, that most of our families were from somewhere else also. All right, you guys, which brings me to the empathy piece. And I said that I wanted to devote a little bit of tonight's conversation to talking about the book, but that I wanted to open it up for a bigger conversation about what unites us, because I'm going to say something here that may be a little controversial for those who read the book and love it, but I don't know that Dan Rather is truly unifying, right? I don't know that any journalist is truly unifying in the times that face us right now. And so I wanted our conversation to be about more than Dan Rather. I wanted our conversation to be more than just about his book, because you know what, guys? It's just right? Journalists, not going to be unifiers, right? I don't even know that a politician can truly be a unifier regardless of who it is, right? Okay? There are too many things that divide us in those constructs, right? Of press, of politics, of party. And I want this discussion, this piece of the discussion, to transcend that, to transcend the labels and get to the heart of the things that really, truly unite us, okay? And that is where empathy comes in. And that is why I wanted to call out that section of the book, to call out the Warren Buffett hypothetical of, if you dipped your hand in a bowl and picked out the slip and that is what you got, the luck of the draw, what kind of world would you design, right? And so I want us to use empathy as a jumping off point for this next piece of the conversation, because it's super important. And if we could all just tap into empathy more, I think people might make different choices. People might make better choices. People might behave differently toward one another. People might engage differently on social media, okay? And this isn't, I'm not being a finger wagging, mama in this conversation, in this moment, right? But I think we could all tap in to empathy a little bit more. And so to kick off this conversation about empathy, I'd like to ask you guys what empathy means to you, right? What does empathy mean to you? If anybody's willing to share in the comments, what does empathy mean to you? And if you think it is an important value, please send up some hearts for empathy. Please send up some hearts for empathy and throw a couple words in the comments about what empathy means to you, because that is going to be the jumping off point for the last 20 minutes of our show, a deeper conversation about empathy, right? So when we're talking about what unites us, right, and we're talking about empathy, for me, like I said, I think Dan's book is beautiful. I respect him a lot as a person, as a journalist, but I don't know that one person, particularly a journalist, is going to be a truly unifying factor right now. And to me, I think maybe some of this too is preaching to the choir in many ways, right? You guys have all heard that phrase before, and I don't want to do that here, okay? Sparked for me is a place that can challenge us in ways to grow, right? In ways to make changes, in ways that we, like the quote at the beginning, can look around and be better in our own lives, in our communities, in the world around us. Scott says empathy means understanding others. Georgie says compassion. Yeah, you guys, understanding others, compassion, that is really the root of empathy, right? It's understanding the feelings of others. Vicky says to be understanding. Yeah, you guys, in a nutshell, those are the things, right? Rose says able to put yourself in another's shoes, understanding. Yes. A lot of people confuse empathy and sympathy. Right? Sympathy is about feeling sorry for someone. And Dan talks about that in the empathy chapter, right? It's not about feeling sorry for someone. It's not about sympathy. It's about really understanding like where they're coming from, what they're going through, why they feel the way they do. That is empathy. Trish says understanding the feeling of situation of that of others. Yeah, exactly. So before we dive into empathy and all of its implications for us as people, I think this is a good time to share another favorite on the show, the moment of joy, you guys. And I'm not going to not do the moment of joy just because we're talking about books and values and all the things on the day before Election Day. We're still making time for moment of joy tonight. And tonight's moment of joy is really all about being united. It's about finding common ground. It's about finding things we have in common. And it's about empathy. And it's this beautiful story that I cut out of, the Washington Post. It's the newspaper, again. But there's a farm, you guys, a farm called Safe in Austin, which is based in Austin, Texas, that connects special needs kids and injured animals. Connects special needs kids and injured animals. So you guys, if you can see these photographs, right, there's all these injured fur babies, there's a sheep, there's these dogs in their little harnesses, and disabled children. And it gives children this beautiful outdoor farm space to play in, to connect with animals, and to, feel some commonality, right? Because in a world that's so focused on differences, right, finding commonality is healing. And for kids especially, gosh, there's such a need for that. There's such a need for that. Yes, so many hearts for finding commonality and healing. And I want to share this one part of the story that I found just really, meaningful and profound. There's a woman named Skylar Carson who is 28 and a volunteer at the farm. 5 days a week, she volunteers at the sanctuary. And she first came there as a visitor in need of support herself, right? Because this place connects children and disabled animals. And she first came there as a visitor in need of support herself. And she said, I have a background of childhood trauma. Adding that the sanctuary played a pivotal role in helping her to heal. So now she is paying it forward and volunteering there 5 days a week. For Carson, what makes Safe in Austin a second home for her is, quote, the unconditional love, the grace and freedom to make a difference no matter what your story is, whether you're a kid or an adult or an animal. I love that. I love those words, you guys. The freedom to make a difference no matter what your story is, whether you're a kid or an adult or an animal. The volunteers are making a difference. The kids are making a difference in their kindness and compassion and affection for the animals. And the animals are making a difference for those kids in seeing commonality, right? Healing. And George says, empathy is as necessary as the air we breathe, our only hope for human endurance. George, I could not agree more. I could not agree more, my friend. Yes, let's send up some hearts for that. So you guys, empathy in its purest form is about understanding someone else's needs. It works both ways, though, right? It works both ways. It's about putting ourselves in other people's shoes. It's about understanding, even when it's hard. Even when it's hard, you guys. And I would say especially when it's hard, right? Empathy is about that moment that we may be getting less than someone else's best side, less than someone else's best self, maybe less than someone else's empathy. that we maybe put ourselves in their shoes and recognize everybody has a story, everybody has a background, everybody has reasons for how they turned out, right? And so empathy works both ways, both from a giving and receiving standpoint. So I wanted to call that out. I'm also, looking at notes here because there's so much that I want to say tonight. So bear with me, you guys. I also feel that empathy and understanding are fundamental to changing hearts and minds, right? So if we think about the issues that face us, right? So many of us, how many of us have engaged in the comment section of a social media thread, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is, and it's the election cycle and we're trying to change minds and we're trying to engage, and it all goes to crap, right? Somebody starts name calling, something happens, and maybe we recognize like I didn't show up as my best self here, and then we lose control of a situation. So empathy and understanding and leading with those things are what change hearts and minds. And it's about thinking what our goal is, right, in the interactions that we engage in, whether it's social media, whether it's in person, whatever it is, what is our goal in that interaction, and how can empathy and understanding inform that, right? And above all, for me, when I think about empathy, it's understanding that my opinion about something is not greater than someone else's true and lived experience. Okay? That opinions don't trump someone else's actual life experience. So when we may make judgments about things because it's what we knew to be true in some other situation, that may not be true for this person's situation, right? Just because we've observed it in the past or we know it to be true from someone else doesn't mean it holds true across the board. So someone else's lived experience has more validity than our own opinions. That is a heart of empathy for me. All right. And for me, I said I wanted to share some stories tonight, and this was never made so apparent for me than when a little while back I was doing some work in criminal justice reform, and specifically working with women in reentry who had been incarcerated and were coming back to the community after a period of incarceration. And it's not particularly that I came at it from a place of judgment, but it's just an issue that I never really thought about. And I think many of us think of our criminal justice system, people who are in jail have done something wrong. People who are in prison have done something wrong. And that's what the system is for, right? And it really opened my eyes to the intersections of, victimhood and criminality. And it made me more empathetic to what people have gone through that find themselves incarcerated and then in turn find themselves needing to re-enter the community after periods of incarceration. And I'm going to share in my resources a little bit later, but there's a great book that also is focused on the wrongfully incarcerated and ways that our empathy can really inform how we see people who are in those situations. Because when we think about values that unite us, freedom, right, was number one on, Dan Rather's list of values, right? The vote, dissent, the press were the first chapter in his book. And freedom that is so important to us, how easily it can be taken away and how wrongfully so at times. So empathy in that space, you guys, yes. I'm seeing so many hearts for empathy. Dana is late but here. It's so great to see you. Thank you for tuning in. We are talking about empathy. We are talking about empathy right now, Dana. And I was sharing a story about how my empathy was made more expansive by some work I had done in the recent past in criminal justice reform and meeting some women who were formerly incarcerated, re-entering the community. And I wanted to give an example of that too. So because, probably not everybody, watching this show has worked in the criminal justice system and How many of you guys have heard of Centoya Brown? How many have heard of Centoya Brown? Share in the comments, raise your hand if you have heard of Centoya Brown's story. Well, you guys, I will share Centoya's story. So this was a case that got national attention about 2 years ago. Centoya was found guilty of first-degree murder, felony murder, and aggravated robbery. Those are the facts of a criminal case. She was tried as an adult at the age of 16 and sentenced to life in prison. Okay? She's a convicted felon and a murderer. So for some people, that's all they need to know, right? They look at someone, a convicted felon, a murderer. God, she was tried as an adult at the age of 16. It was heinous. And they'll judge, right? We make judgments about that. She is a convicted criminal. She is a criminal. She is a murderer. She is a felon. Okay? For those who don't know Centoya's story, here's the other side of it. What if we learned that the person she killed was a 43-year-old man who bought her for sex at the age of 16? That she was a victim of child trafficking, but that wasn't taken into consideration when she was sentenced and tried as an adult. So in this particular instance of Centoya Brown, and her sentence was commuted a few years ago. She was released from prison. Evidence was considered. She spent quite a number of years already incarcerated. I believe she's in her early 30s now, so she spent, nearly half her life imprisoned. And so, you guys, her story is one that shows the lines can blur, right? She was a convicted criminal, but she was also a victim. The victim in the case was also a criminal. And so expanding our definitions, having some empathy, looking for both sides of the story. Which brings me to this week's charity, you guys. Over the summer, my book club read the book Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. Bryan Stevenson is a public interest lawyer who founded the organization, the Equal Justice Initiative. And the Equal Justice Initiative works on criminal justice reform. It helps to free the wrongfully convicted. It's working on issues of racial inequity. So it's righting a lot of wrongs that have happened to people. And I couldn't think of a better charity to exemplify our conversation this week than the Equal Justice Initiative. So that is where our 10% of contributions are going tonight. Scott says, Bryan is a hero. He is a hero, you guys. He is a true hero in every sense of the word. The work that this man is doing, the work that the Equal Justice Initiative is doing, is changing lives. It is saving lives, literally. He's freed people who were on death row, who were wrongfully convicted, wrongful convictions of people who ended up on death row. And I can't think of anything more worthy than restoring the freedom of someone from whom it was wrongfully taken. So this week's charity is the Equal Justice Initiative, you guys. And we're winding down the conversation, but I also want to share something. I talked at the top of the hour about how when I was struggling with content for the show, I was struggling for a lens, I was struggling for the right frame. I watched, poured a glass of wine and I watched This Is Us. And what I love about that show and what I love about the Pearson family is the ways that for all their differences, for all their family drama, right, they can love each other and connect with each other. And it's just a brilliantly, emotively written story that continues to surprise week after week after week and always tugs the heartstrings in really beautiful ways. And as I was thinking about more values that unite us, right, I wanted to start with empathy, but I want to share a little bit about what I think truly unites us. And yes, Dan's book is a beautiful exploration of values like voting and, dissent and education, public education and the arts and, community and character and audacity and all of those things. But you guys, when I watched the show and I thought about ways that we can all as humans, regardless of, whether Dan Rather resonates with us or not, regardless of what side of the aisle we're on politically, regardless of gender, religion, race, any of the things that people use to divide us as humans. I wrote this myself, you guys, and this is what I see as the picture of what unites us, and I want to share it with you. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to be understood. We want to be healthy. We want to be free. We want to be treated fairly. We want to be safe. We want to be loved. We want all of those things for our loved ones. Acceptance, compassion, options, opportunities, freedom, respect, respite. Respite from struggle, from oppression, from fear. That's what unites us. That is our common ground, right? And I truly believe it's only when we fulfill on that promise to others that we will be granted the full grace of our own humanity. When we can see that the things we want for ourselves and our loved ones are the things that everyone else wants and deserves and needs as well, you guys, that is where we are given the full grace of our own humanity. Thank you guys for all the hearts. I'm seeing the hearts come up. Yes, when we fulfill on that promise to others, you guys, these are the values that unite us, all right? These are the things we want for all our families, that everybody wants for their families. And when we recognize that it's not just us, but it's the family who wants to come here for a better life, right? It's the family who may never get to come here for a better life and are living across the world somewhere. It's the family next door. It's the family in rural Kentucky. It's the family in New York City, right? It's the woman in, Portland. It's the man in Mexico. It's people. We want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to be understood, we want to be healthy, we want to be free, we want to be treated fairly, we want to be safe, we want to be loved, and we want all of those things for our loved ones. So let's remember those things that we want for ourselves and for our loved ones and extend that same grace to others. That, I believe, you guys, is what truly, truly unites us. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Georgie, Rose, yeah, you guys, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that because I wanted to transcend all the labels, right? These are things, it doesn't matter who we are as people. Trish, spot on. Thank you. Yeah, that meant a lot to me to write, to say, to share with you guys because those are the things that I believe truly unite us. It doesn't have to come from a person. It doesn't have to come from a journalist. It doesn't come from a politician, right? Those things come from in here. And it's when we look inward at what we want for ourselves and the people that we love, and we extend that same grace to others, right? That we tap into our empathy and we can truly be extended and granted the full grace of our own humanity. All right, I want to offer some tips to you guys because I know it's a super stressful time for a lot of people. We're feeling, a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of antipathy in the air. There's a lot of crazy things happening. People trying to run buses off the road. Who does that? Who behaves that way, right? Empathy, people. What would you want if that was a bus full of school children, right? You guys, I mean, come on. Come on. People are doing things in this country that if they stopped for a minute and thought about it and turned that back on themselves and their own family and thought, if this was happening to you, if someone was talking to you this way, if someone was talking to your child this way, what would you think? What would you think? And again, this isn't meant to be a finger wagging like moment. This is meant like people need to look in their hearts. People need to look in their hearts at the way they're behaving, at the things they're saying, at the things they're doing. And if this were your own kids, if this were your mom that someone was doing this to, what the heck, right? You guys, what the heck? And it's about empathy. It's about recognizing, you know, we need to tap into empathy. All right. And so all of this craziness is happening around us. I think that's also a good lens for looking at people that we elevate in, our heroes, right? Scott called Brian Stevenson a hero, and he's one of the resources I want to share in a minute. But when we talk about our heroes, when we lift people up to positions of power in our communities and in our country, right? Looking at those qualities, at those characteristics, right, that I just shared, right? The quality of someone's character, the way they treat other people. Are they inclusive? Are they expansive? Are they loving? Are they kind? Are they exhibiting the qualities of basic human decency, right? This should be a minimal bar, right? This should be a minimal bar. And so when we look to people, when we cast our votes, right? This isn't about party. This isn't about politics. This is about basic human decency. This is about the common good. This is about if people talk this way or did these things to your daughter or your mother, what would you want to happen, right? And so that is what I hope everybody can just think a little bit about, turn the lens inward a little bit, and think before we act and speak and do crazy things like trying to run people off the road and all of the other stuff, right? So I want to offer some tips for, getting through this cycle with a little bit more peace of mind, a little bit more grace, and some more hope, right? Because a lot of us are worried about how this is all going to go down in the next few days, regardless of the outcome, whether it's the outcome that we're hoping for ourselves or not, or whether it takes time to know what the outcome of tomorrow is, right? Which is probably, in many ways could create more anxiety, right? If it drags out even longer, on some level, we just want to be able to heave a deep breath and say, it's over, but maybe it won't be, right? We don't know. And so regardless of what happens, I wanted to offer some tips for how to get through this with a little bit more peace of mind, grace, and hope. And so, number one, you guys, I can't emphasize this enough, prioritize your mental and emotional health. Prioritize your mental and emotional health. Recognize what triggers you. Whether it's network news, social media, family members, friends, whatever it is, minimize it. Okay? There's only so much we can take in a day, you guys. Prioritize your own mental and emotional health. Minimize the triggers. Self-care is necessary during times like these. Do not forget that, y'all. Tip number one, prioritize your mental and emotional health, all right? Prioritize. Number two, big theme tonight of our conversation, let your values guide you in all things. And if you haven't sat down and actually made a list of your core values, I encourage you guys to do that. And I've talked about that before in the show. I encourage everybody to make a list of your core values and really write them down, make that list and look at them and remember what they are and lead with those in everything we do. I talk about that with my clients. I do that in my own life, and I think it's beneficial to us in a lot of different ways. So list your core values, lead with those in all things, right? Summon the courage of your convictions, right? Model the behavior that you admire in others, right? When it comes to, letting your values guide you, right? The things that we look at others and say, gosh, this is such a great person, right? Like the Mr. Rogers of the world, right? The RBGs of the world, right? The Michelle Obamas of the world. The people that transcend the labels of party and all the things that are just good humans, right? Let's model those qualities that we admire in others. And there's an RBG quote that I love that applies here when she said, fight for the things you care about and do it in a way that will lead others to join you. So we can fight like hell, you guys, fight like hell for the things we care about, but do it in a way that brings others along with us and doesn't alienate people in the process, because that does not accomplish our goals. That does not accomplish our goals, y'all. Yeah. Dana says, I choose to do self-care by spending an entire day in my jammies watching shows. I love that, Dana. Yes, jammies and shows. Trish, opening our eyes to point to new understanding, compassion, to change inside ourselves. Yes, change happens inside us first, and modeling that change outside. All right, so letting our values guide us in all the things, prioritizing our mental and emotional health. You guys, don't lose hope. Don't ever lose your hopefulness, okay? Even in the face of challenges, even in the face of unwelcome outcomes, which, we have all had happen in many ways. This year has been a challenging year for us on so many levels. Don't ever lose hope, okay? Know that even in dark times, that especially in dark times, right? We can be the change we want to see. We can be that hope. We can make a difference. Even when it's really hard, especially when it's hard, that is when we need to tap into our hopefulness, into our charitableness, into our empathy the most, and make that difference, be the change we want to see. And I want to just remind us all again, too, that the big picture trajectory of progress in this country has always been forward, you guys. Yes, there are setbacks. There are times that the world seems like it's gone mad, okay? We're in the middle of one of them. There are setbacks, but the long-term trajectory has always been positive, and so let's not ever lose sight of that. It's one of the things I loved and admired so much about John Lewis, when he talked about the trajectory of hope and progress is long and lasting, y'all. And so let's keep our eye on that forward trajectory. And then the last tip I want to offer to weather the season with a little bit more peace of mind and grace and hopefulness is remember the power of gratitude. Remember the power of gratitude, you guys. Even during the darkest of times, even during this challenging season that we have all lived through for the past, 8 months of this year, there's always something, there's always someone to be thankful for. Don't ever forget the power of gratitude. You guys, don't ever forget the power of gratitude. And I said I wanted to share some resources quick before we sign off for the night. And so I want to do that now. And all of the resources I'm sharing tonight are about building empathy in maybe some different ways. And so I want to start with the book Just Mercy that I mentioned when we talked about Bryan Stevenson. This is the author of Just Mercy is the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, which is this week's charity organization. Just Mercy is a true story. It is Bryan's memoir of his legal work to free the wrongfully convicted. And it's so powerful. It just made me think about things in ways that I never imagined. And there's a great movie that also stars Michael B. Jordan and Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx was actually nominated for an Academy Award for playing one of Bryan's wrongfully convicted clients on death row in that movie. So great movie, amazing book, Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. I also wanted to share this book called Heartland. This is a memoir of working hard and being broke in the richest country on earth, you guys. And this is about building empathy. A lot of us talk about, the middle of America like it's the flyover states, and we don't think twice about it. We don't think twice about the people that could be struggling there, the people who, are born into life situations and find it really hard to struggle and get out of them. And this book is written by a woman named Sarah Smarsh, who was born into a family of farmers. And she writes about her family's struggles with poverty and all kinds of trials that they have faced over generations and in her lifetime. And again, empathy building, great book, Heartland by Sarah Smarsh. And the last book I want to share is about building empathy cross species, and for our planet writ large, okay? Because I think that's another area of real importance in the world, okay? And this is The 10 Trusts by Jane Goodall. The 10 Trusts by Jane Goodall. What we must do to care for the animals we love and also the planet that we live on. And this book is great exploration of those things. The 10 Trusts by Jane Goodall. And I want to leave you guys with one more thing that you guys know I love cutting comic strips out of the paper, and I didn't share one this week because I was saving it for the end. I was saving it for the end because tomorrow is officially election day. You know, I've got my vote necklace on. We've been talking about voting. We've been talking about all the things that are uniting us right now, not dividing us. And, you know, I know a lot of us have already voted. Scott and I are actually voting in person tomorrow. We decided that that was an important statement to make and an important action to take. And we are voting in person tomorrow. And so we will be in the lines. We've always had really great luck with our polling place here where we live in Northern Virginia in Loudoun County. We've never had much of a wait. There's always really great voter turnout here, but we're lucky with our polling places. So we're keeping our fingers crossed for tomorrow, but we're ready to wait it out and do whatever we need to do to vote in person. And so the last thing I wanted to leave y'all with is this comic strip that I cut out of the Sunday paper, because you guys, there have been a ton of comics every single day that's about voting, that's about the election, but this one just resonated with me most, and I felt like was most connected to our theme of what unites us. And it's the comic strip Leo, and he's kind of an odd kid. He's kind of like Halloween all year round, and so that's why there's a lot of monsters and all kinds of different creatures, right, in the comic strip. But it spells out vote in red and blue letters, red and blue, y'all, what unites us. And down here, he's holding a little sign that says, we the people, vote for each other. We the people vote for each other. You guys, and that is the thought I want to leave us with on the day before Election Day 2020. We the people, what if we cast our votes for each other? Okay, based on what we need as people, what unites us, we the people vote for each other, vote for the betterment of our country, of our world, the things that we want, to be loved, to be heard, to be healthy, to be safe. Everybody else wants those things too. We the people vote for each other. All right, you guys, that is the last thought I wanted to leave you with tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. I loved being here with y'all. Thank you so much for spending this election eve with me. If you're going out to vote tomorrow, be safe, be well. Even if you're not going out to vote tomorrow, be safe, be well, be good to each other, be good to yourselves. I love y'all, and I will see you back here next week. We are kicking off officially our November theme next week, and you guys, we're going to have a little bit of fun in November because we're heading into the holidays. We're heading into, we just turned the clocks back, so it's going to be getting darker earlier. You know, a lot of us, you know, have some issues when we have way compressed moments of daylight. And so I want to bring a little bit of fun and levity into the month of November. And so the overarching theme for November is winter is coming. Winter is coming, you guys. And for my Game of Thrones peeps, you know that that is a little nod to one of my favorite shows that Scott and I watched during quarantine early on, Game of Thrones. But this isn't going to be violent or about overthrowing other tribes. No, this is about winter is coming. This is about things that we can do to be our best selves and bring some joy and go back to the basics during this kind of darker season for us. So next week, November theme, winter is coming, what we can do to make it awesome. Love y'all. I will see you next week. Be good to each other, be good to yourselves, and have a great week ahead. Mwah. Good night.